Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Ryan, aka Ryantist the Scientist. I am on a mission to empower and inspire everyone with knowledge and fervor of the natural world. Maybe you have some questions, and that's great. I'm here to answer them for you. So let's do that together here on another episode of Ryantist the Scientist. Yes, I'm so excited to be able to talk about something really, really fun and cool and scary, and that is tornadoes. I'm super stoked that somebody called in to ask about tornadoes. So before we do anything, thank you for calling and asking about tornadoes because awesome. Also, don't forget that you can support the show on all of the different platforms by following, tuning in, calling in, visiting the science shop, visiting my Patreon, all of those ways that you contribute to the show and show your support via your presence, your reviews, your everything is super, super helpful. And it helps the show reach new people, get bigger, grow this little community, and grow my reforestation project, which is planting trees to reforest Appalachia and other national parks around the country that have experienced deforestation, as well as other parts of the world that have experienced deforestation. We're all contributing to those particular projects, and that's really, really awesome. So thank you for all of your support. And now we need to talk about tornadoes because awesome. And let's hear the question first, and then we'll dive into the deets.
Is the reason that tornadoes are so dark because they pick up so much debris along the way? Or are they initially a dark cloud, dark wind?
All right, awesome. I'm so excited to talk about tornadoes. They're so crazy. They're also like very much like an American thing. So the United States has the most occurrences of tornadoes than any other country in the world, with like 75% of all the tornadoes that occur on the planet happen in the United States. So like of these tornadoes that occur in the United States, most of them happen in, I'm sure everyone's familiar with, Tornado Alley, and that's like towards the center of the country. And so yeah, tornadoes. We love it. We're all fans. Twister from the 90s, Helen Hunt, Bill Paxton. Yes. So what even is a tornado though? So like to get to the question, we have to like give a little bit of this like background information. So like what even is a tornado? Basically, what a tornado is, it's a column of air that is rotating that physically connects a thunderstorm in the atmosphere to the ground. And this happens inside the thunderstorm clouds when they start to turn because warmer, more humid air is rising up from the ground and cooler air is falling with rain or hail to the ground. So this like current of rotating current starts to get made in this thunderstorm. And when the current is spinning horizontally, parallel to the surface of the earth, it's rolling, it's spinning, and sometimes it can shift, and that is literally a tornado. And it connects the ground to the clouds. Tornado. So this dropping of the column of rotating air can happen relatively easily depending on like a bunch of stuff like where you are and like how that ties into like how simple it can happen, which is why it happens so often in the United States, in the center of the country, and very rarely everywhere else in the world. So If it's just rotating air, then how can we see it? And this is where your question comes into play, because you can't always see it, or at least not always see it well. And the at least like the mechanisms of a tornado, unless it forms this thing called a condensation funnel. And that's like the visible part of the visible component of the tornado because of what it's made up of, which is water, debris, dust, junk, etc., because it's making contact with the ground and picking stuff up in this like upward current, and it creates this dark visible condensation funnel. So, as we know from the late great Bill Paxton and the still great Helen Hunt, tornadoes are measured on a scale. The Fujita scale, now the Enhanced Fujita Scale. So that goes from the F0, F1, F2, up to the massively epic F5, super destructive. And the scale, it's been updated to the Enhanced Fujita Scale in 2007, which is like after the movie came out, which is why they do not reference the Enhanced Fujita Scale. They reference the Fujita Scale in that movie. So it's, how do I say? The scale doesn't have as much to do with the measured strength of the tornado, because those measurements are really, really difficult to get for each individual tornado. So it's actually, like we've seen the Dorothy thing get like knocked over so many times in the movie, but it's based off of the amount of damage that the tornado actually does. So let's dive into like each one a little bit, I think, so we can kind of get a good understanding of like how some can appear so dark and some can appear like visible and like kind of grayish, and like still visible, and like kind of how that mechanism works. So an F0 tornado is characterized as weak, and it has like estimated wind gusts of 65 to 85 miles an hour, and they can do some damage to a house, trees. They can bust up your chimney. They can break branches of like big trees, not like twigs, like big trees. You can uproot some. Smaller trees that have more shallow roots than other trees, like willows, some of your ornamental, like decorative trees, rip them right out. An F1 tornado is also characterized as being pretty weak, and its estimated wind gusts are between 86 and 110 miles an hour. And this does like some more moderate damage, including like pushing around some cars and other motor vehicles, trucks, etc. And some more like significant damage to houses, like ripping maybe pieces of a chimney off, ripping off like some of the what are those things? Shingles, the vinyl siding, etc. And then your F2 and your F3 tornadoes are the stronger ones, and these are they're categorized as strong tornadoes, and they have between like an F2 111 to 135 miles an hour winds, and F3 136 to 165. And they do significant damage. They're like tearing roofs off, knocking down walls, like picking up and tossing vehicles around. That's these tornadoes. And then F4 and F5, these are violent tornadoes. They're categorized as violent. They have wind speeds that can get up to around 166 to 200 miles an hour for an F4 tornado. And then anything over 200 miles an hour in their estimated wind speeds is an F5 tornado, which is like completely insane to think about wind being that strong. And these tornadoes, this category of tornadoes, F4, F5, they're like completely devastating tornadoes. They demolish entire houses, other structures, completely level them to the ground, ripping out, tossing trees around, throwing cars, trucks like super far, like tossing them. Like cars and trees, if they're still standing, then trees get knocked over. Like that kind of damage is what we're talking about. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, so there's different kinds of tornadoes as well. And so first I'm going to share a little story about my recent experience with a tornado, and then we're going to get into like some of these other things. So recently where I live in New York City, there was a tornado and it happened like super fast. So like tornadoes are, um, they're really vulnerable. It's like once the system itself is really vulnerable. So once it starts, it's super easy for it to be disrupted. And that's kind of why tornadoes last not such a long time, because once the system is established and you have this current and it touches down, it needs to maintain that in order to keep going. And it's really, really easy to like disrupt that with like changes in pressure, um, like the changes in temperature, like fast, sudden changes in temperature, that anything that can shift or make an alteration to the tornado will make it just go away. So the one that I saw in New York, it happened super, super fast, and it was a different kind. Okay, so how do I want to say this? So yeah, I saw a tornado in New York City. It lasted for a really, really short period of time. And there's two different types of tornadoes. So we have super massive supercell tornadoes. And these are the ones that have these updrafts and they get super big, super wide, and super dark. They're really, really dark because of this updraft. So while it's spinning and like lifting debris, dust, water, etc., material, it's disrupting it. It has this updraft that carries it up into the air and keeps it circulating around itself, the condensation funnel. And that's like the supercell. It has this updraft that it makes it able to get a lot darker. And then there's the non-supercell tornadoes, and these are your landspouts and waterspouts, and they're like more the ropey ones that they kind of like wiggle around and like look like S's, and they start like way over here and they come down and then back up a little bit and then back down to the ground. Those are the non-supercell tornadoes, and they are not as dark because they don't have that big updraft that lifts a lot of stuff all the way up and gives it like a much like darker appearance. It's still visible. These are like the gray, ropey, like wriggly tornadoes. And the tornado that I saw was a waterspout. It happened like super, super fast. It was on the Hudson River in, I guess that was Harlem, Washington Heights, and it came from the river. It formed really, really fast, and like it lifted up all this water, and it was this visible water spout that jutted inland and came from the river onto the land, and it ripped up a bunch of these what kind of trees were they? I think they were Kwanzaa cherries. There were some ornamental trees that are really small, maybe like 10 feet or 12 feet tall, not super deep roots. So even though it was really, really small and a pretty weak tornado, and it only lasted for like a few seconds, it was strong enough and it happened fast enough that it ripped out a bunch of these trees, like roots and all, just ripped them all right out and tossed them to the ground, and then it was gone. It was disrupted that fast, probably because it wasn't super strong, and hitting those trees disrupted like the current enough to kill the tornado. So basically, to answer your question more specifically, or to reiterate the answer to your question, it depending on what type of tornado it is, supercell, non-supercell, you're going to get a different degree of like darkness. The like for visuals, like let's think about the movie. So in Twister, we have like the waterspout tornado that was moving the cows back and forth. Like we have debris, cow, another cow. I think it's the same cow. Those tornadoes they're more ropey, and they were gray and watery because they were over the water. They were doing some damage. They were making cows fly around, but they weren't super dark, but they were dark enough to be visible. And that's a not supercell tornado. Then, like towards the end of the movie, we have that like giant black, almost mile wide, huge tornado that's like ripping through cornfields. It's like black, looks like a cloud of dirt just like flying everywhere. That's a supercell tornado because it has that updraft that's able to carry a ton of that material up around itself while it's rotating and gets stuck in this gets trapped in this current that is rotating, and it gets darker and darker and darker the more and more and more and more it picks up, and the longer it lasts. So yeah, it depends on what kind of tornado it is, and like that's a really good like visual. So I hope that answered your question. I'm really excited that somebody called and asked about tornadoes. I'm super into like weather stuff, particularly tornadoes, because they're such a unique thing to North America. They happen in other parts of the world, but it's like a very North American thing, and it's something that we deal with the most. So like it interests me to learn about it because it's like it's a feature of where we are from, where we live. So I hope that answers your question. I'm happy that somebody called in about this stuff. I would love to talk more about weather phenomenon and like cool, crazy, weird things that happen just because they do. Because weather can be insane. Maybe we can get into some other stuff and some Earth stuff, like hurricanes, tsunamis. That'll be fun. So thank you again for calling in with your question and for supporting the show. Your question has resulted in this episode, which plants a tree. So part of my reforestation project, we're planting trees. Every episode, portions of the proceeds of every episode, you can support the show on Patreon, and that plants trees monthly, as well as keeps the lights on, which is excellent. You can visit the science store. I'm selling the show art, so prints of every episode will have its own unique, and does have its own unique art for each show. And I'm selling the prints of each one of these episodes. They're pretty cool. I think they're like $12. I love them. I have a few of them, even episodes that haven't come out yet, in my room, which is exciting. And you know, they're really, really cool. And that also we're planting trees, and we're doing the cool things. So thank you for being a part of this community, this platform to learn some stuff, to talk about some stuff, ask some questions. And until next time, I will see you. Bye. If you have questions that you would like to ask, call into the show. That phone number is 347-470-4144. Again, 347-470-4144. And remember, there are no questions that are too big or too small. Music for the show was created by Julian Giamma. I want to say thank you so much for working with me to create such a fun song, and thank you everyone for listening and for supporting the show. See you all again next week.